This video can be unsettling for younger audiences, especially those who have a fear for disfigured faces or spiders. Do not watch if you have a fear for either of those. Viewer discretion is advised.
Happy Halloween everyone, Astrovitha of the Mashup Media Galaxy here again, and I think it's time to remake an old list. Now, fans of my content are likely aware of the garbage that was my 2023 Halloween special. Seriously, that video was a disgrace. The list was filled with villains who are not scary and only a select few are actually qualified. Not to mention the shit show that was the honorable mentions. And I no longer hold any of that list as true. So take that whole list and throw it in the trash where it belongs. Now, let's get to the list that we shall now set the standard for me for real this time. As for the rules, I have a few. 1. No villain protagonists. 2. If they're more badass or funny than scary, they don't count. 3. Their presence has to be intimidating through atmosphere, personality, if there is one, design, and lore. 4. None of the top 10 from the original list will be mentioned, so even actually scary villains from that list like Giygas and Majora will be disqualified. 5. No slasher movie villains, since I think their inclusion is too obvious and I also don't want to be harassed for putting one iconic slasher over another. 6. No fan-made villains, so creepypastas are off the table. And 7. I have to be aware of the character's existence to a degree where I and all my scriptwriters are able to explain them properly. Now with that said, let's get into the actual list. Shall we?
All that remains is for you to watch as I drag your beloved Gotham into oblivion.
Batman has had a long list of villains that he's had to face. Many of them are definitely scary. And while it is so tempting to put one of the absolute Batman villains on the list, I won't, since the comic run isn't finished, and also I think that would be too obvious. Instead, let's look to the self-proclaimed Master of Fear, Lord of Despair, and all-terrible God of Fear, Scarecrow. Now, I know those names came from Batman the Animated Series, but there's a much scarier version, that being the Arkhamverse version. This version of Scarecrow is among the few villains to give the Joker himself a run for his money in terms of depravity and fear. Now, what makes him so scary? For starters, talk about his design first. The first design is a blend between the Batman the Animated Series Scarecrow mixed with a hint of Freddy Krueger, but the second one is even more disturbing. I mean, his face itself was turned into a mask and his mouth was disfigured, which makes him look all the more creepy. Combined with that gauntlet of syringes that he uses to inject fear toxin into his victims. Now, as for his personality, I believe one of the Arkham doctors put it best when they said he's perfectly sane. Just evil. This guy enjoys the mental torture he inflicts on people, whether it be to expand on his research on fear or even just for sick pleasure. And don't let his skinny frame in Asylum or his half-broken look in Arkham Knight fool you. He is dangerous. His plans, if he succeeded, would have covered several states across the eastern seaboard, which would have made him the biggest terrorist in human history. And he could have gone global with spreading his fear toxin. He's also responsible for turning Harvey Dent into Two-Face, further driving Harley Quinn into the arms of the Joker, and causing the ventriloquist to become a supervillain. And that's just what we know. And that's not even going over how his fear toxin kills most of its victims by means of making them suffer from panic attacks, which makes it the most lethal version of the toxin. And also the mindfuck moments in Asylum that play with Batman's reality and even messes with your mind as well with the toxin, making it seem like the game crashed and glitched at one point. All in all, Scarecrow is terrifying, but the next few are even more disturbing.
And at the end of fear, oblivion.
Its death, I think the whistle alone gave it away. People have given thought pieces about how Death is an absolutely horrifying character. Let's start with his design. The piercing red eyes, the elongated snout with the fangs, the sickles he carries with him, the black cloak all put together makes for a scary design. All enhanced with Wagner Moura's chilling performance adding a sinister flair to his character. But it's the concept and atmosphere that really makes him scary. As for why he's called Death, well, let's let Death himself explain.
And I don't mean it metaphorically or rhetorically or poetically or theoretically or in any other fancy way. I'm Death, straight up.
That's right, this is the Grim Reaper himself, not some edgelord poser. Next, his atmosphere always brings dread, from the panic Puss feels at the mere sight of him, to the whistle, to how everything stops and becomes deadly serious the second he shows up. And then there's the fact that his connection to Puss is personal. He doesn't care much about the other characters, he's after Puss personally, and he drags the encounters out in order to instill as much fear as possible, making him all the more bone-chilling. Then again, it's always the villains with a single objective to take out the main character that has the most potential to be scary. And Death definitely fulfills that criteria. That being said, since he can be reasoned with to an extent, he only gets number 9.
I just love the smell of fear.
Now, when it comes to dinosaur villains, there are a lot of options. From the iconic Sharptooth to the Carnotaurus twins from Dinosaur, and even fellow Jurassic villains like the Indoraptor, Spinosaurus, Mutodons, and Indominus Rex. However, ultimately I had to go with the Indominus Rex at the end of the day, from her massive scale being bigger than a T-Rex, to her pale white skin, blood-red eyes, crocodile-like teeth, and long claws. The Indominus Rex is certainly one scary monster already, but then there's the dorsal spines that are just there to be scary in terms of how they designed the creature. But now let's discuss the creature's personality. Indominus probably has the least significant excuse for its deeds out of all the dino villains. Rexy, the Jurassic Park raptors, and the Giganotosaurus are all natural predators with no malicious intent. The D-Rex's story is not concluded, so I can't make a definitive statement on it. The Spino was used and abused by humanity, the Indoraptor was tortured and essentially molded into a living weapon since birth, and the Scorpio's Rex is mentally unstable and is incapable of thinking straight in the slightest. The Indominus, on the other hand, while made up of genetically hostile animals and was raised in isolation, was still nowhere near as much of a victim as the others and is actively hunting out of a combination of curiosity and sadism. And like the Spinosaurus, the Indominus actively hates humans. So with its unnatural origin and design, mixed with its ability to camouflage and speak to velociraptors, and her sadistic personality, she gets number 8 on the list. Greyback is a Harry Potter character that doesn't really get a lot of time to shine, especially in the movies, but what we do know of him is beyond disturbing. He's a werewolf who actively seeks out people to infect with lycanthropy.
The disease that turns people to werewolves, by the way.
And he's so bloodthirsty and sadistic that he sharpened his teeth and fingernails to allow him to harm, kill, and eat people even without turning into a werewolf. Yeah, this guy is a sadistic cannibal who actually likes to target children specifically. This pure sadism certainly helps add to how disturbing he is. Heck, even Voldemort himself knows to keep Greyback on a tight leash due to how dangerous he is. All of this alone makes him scary, but the main reason why he isn't any higher is that we don't see a lot of him, nor do we see him commit the same scale of crimes as characters like Voldemort, Bellatrix, or even Dolores Umbridge. That being said, his sadism and cannibalism helps him stand out enough to be on this list. The newest villain in the Mario franchise, Reclusa, is actually pretty terrifying, from his manic behavior to his disturbingly sadistic side being on full display for most of his scenes, to the context of his crimes. It's very hard to be more disturbing and evil than him. Only Dementio and King Boo have successfully kept their titles as the most evil Mario villains above Reclusa, and even then it's a close call. Now, his design is more deranged than scary, and the hammy side of his personality is the main reason why he hasn't reached the upper half of this list. As for why he's on the list at all, it leans entirely on existential horror with how he traps his victims in simulations, and as they slowly die off in their personal heaven, he slowly destroys their world until he's bored and moves on to the next. The amount of worlds he's done this to is unknown, and we only see him do it once, and Mario and Luigi put an end to that attempt, and any other future attempts, by killing him. But the fact he's done this before and does it with such glee is disturbing all on its own. That being said, since we do not get any context about the past worlds he's destroyed, the terror we could feel is limited. That being said, he is still a terrifying foe. Now, Many Disney villains could have ended up on this list. Chernabog is one people would expect to be on this list. But frankly, since he doesn't really do much of anything aside from play with and destroy evil spirits that serve him and he's driven off by church bells, he doesn't really inspire as much fear as he could. The same situation applies to most other Disney villains who could qualify, save for this one. The Horned King is Disney's most evil villain in their entire animated movie catalogue, and that title was earned through several things. 1. The fear he inspires to the point where his right-hand man will harm himself in order to appease his master's rage. And 2. His end goal is the eradication of all life and to rule over the remains of the world once everyone else is dead. Now, let's get into more detail as to why he's scary, rather than just describing how evil he is. For starters, his design is terrifying, from the red robes, the jagged horns, his sharp and jagged teeth, the bone-thin frame, and sharp nails. Next, an absolutely bone-chilling voice provided by the late John Hurt. In fact, let's have a listen.
My beloved warriors have come to life. All the dead of centuries past. Never has anyone created an army like this. Go forth, my deathless warriors. Destroy all in your path.
The atmosphere helps a lot, as well as a haunting droning happens in most of his scenes along with the sinister theme itself. And how his scenes are always seen with him either partially obscured in shadows or putting emphasis on how he towers over his foes, adding an extra sense of dread to his character. Even his death is disturbing, with how his flesh is ripped from his bones bit by bit, his skeleton is set on fire, and then he explodes. Overall, the Horned King is absolutely unsettling, and the movie goes out of its way to make him as scary as possible. And to think that this is the neutered version. One deleted scene shows the Horned King's undead army melting someone into a skeleton. I won't show you the footage, but if you have some morbid curiosity, just look it up. Now let's move on.
Now I call on my army of the dead. The Cauldron Born. Arise, my messengers of death. Our time has arrived.
Warning to all those who have arachnophobia, because this one involves a spider so dangerous that the devil himself fears her. That spider is Ungoliant from the Silmarillion. Now, this beast doesn't get a lot of time to shine, so that's one of the main reasons why she doesn't rank any higher. But there are some things to take note of. 1. She helped Morgoth destroy the two trees of Valinor. 2. After that, she made Morgoth surrender the gems of Fëanor, and after he refused to give her the Silmarils, she beat him in a fight and nearly ate him, only being driven off by a force of Balrogs, either 3, 5, or 7 of them. 3. After this, she went into hiding and produced more giant spiders, including one of the most iconic spiders in all of fantasy, Shelob. And 4. Her fate is a mystery. Some say she's still out there. Others say she became so ravenous that she eventually ate herself. So yeah, on top of being an arachnophobic person's worst nightmare, she managed to beat Morgoth in a fight, and keep in mind that Morgoth is supposed to be the second most powerful character in the franchise. So someone who can defeat Morgoth is also pretty scary, especially if they have malevolent intent, which is why Ungoliant earned her spot on this list. And again, the only reason she's not any higher is because she's a character who doesn't do as much as she could have. Metroid villain in the house that, despite being nowhere as evil as Ridley, is definitely more unnerving towards casual players. This thing is a silent stalker that you must avoid at all costs as it prowls various parts of the ship to try and kill you. Now, many other stalker type characters have come up in Metroid, such as the killer robots that Ravenbeak hijacked in Dread, but ultimately, the SAX takes the cake due to how relentless it is and how it embodies the phrase, silent but deadly. I would elaborate further on the SAX, but aside from it being one of Samus's suits taken over by an ex-parasite that now stalks Samus, it doesn't really have all that much to it aside from silent dread. For those who are familiar with Marvel and their comics, needs no introduction to this next candidate. Carnage is one of the biggest menaces in Spider-Man's entire rogues gallery. But for those who don't know, his backstory surrounds the serial killer Cletus Cassidy, who was put on death row, until he got his hands on the symbiote offspring of Venom. Thus, he became Carnage. Now, Carnage's design is obviously scary, from the eyes to the elongated tongue to the teeth, the red symbiote skin with the black veins, and overall, Carnage already looks like a horror movie character. There's also the fact that he's a deranged and highly sadistic serial killer, so he takes his time to be an absolute menace with no capacity for good in him. And that is what makes him scary. In fact, you can draw many parallels between him and the Nintendo villain Ridley, who was on my last list. But now would be disqualified since he's more badass than scary, even if he wasn't on the last list. But the reason Carnage counts, while Ridley doesn't, is because the comics and most adaptations go out of their way to depict Carnage as absolutely psychotic. And he doesn't really come up with a badass and extremely catchy theme. With all that said, Carnage more than earns this spot on the list, but there is one who is even more scary than him. Now before we get to number 1, here's some quick honorable mentions. The Red Death from the live-action How to Train Your Dragon. A mountain-sized monster far more imposing than the original, with black and red scales and multiple rows of human-sized teeth to boot. Sharptooth from The Land Before Time, a T-Rex that has terrified children for generations. Queen Vanessa from A Hat in Time, a stalker-type horror character from a game that is normally very light-hearted, or at least colourful. The Lich from Adventure Time, one of Cartoon Network's most bone-chilling and cruel foes. Xenomorph from Alien Isolation. This creature terrorizes you all throughout the game, and it would qualify, but since it originated from a horror movie, it fails that specific criteria. Future Him from the Powerpuff Girls. While the main version is a non-qualifier due to his comedic quirks, this version is more scary than the original. King Boo from Luigi's Mansion. On top of actively trying to scare Luigi, the sheer pettiness he holds almost rivals the Reverse Flash, which is a disturbing thought. The Shadow Queen, the original Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. This character has an undead vibe with intense gothic horror vibes. Too bad the remake botched that with heavy metal. Judge Doom from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Christopher Lloyd's performance mixed with the characterization is certainly disturbing, and his plot twist reveal, well, let's just play this clip.
Remember me, Eddie? When I killed your brother, I talked. Just
And Psycho Mantis from Metal Gear, a villain that can literally use his powers to mess with the game itself. Now let's do a quick recap before we get to number 1. Number 10, fear-mongering half-zombie. Number 9, the Grim Reaper in wolf form. Number 8, the psychopathic dinosaur that terrorized Isla Nubla. Number 7, the cannibalistic werewolf of the Wizarding World. Number 6, the world-traveling TV screen demon that terrorizes populations. Number 5, the lich with a desire for pure chaos and bloodshed. Number 4, an arachnophobic person's worst nightmare. Number 3, Samus's parasite-created clone that stalks her throughout the game. And number 2, Spider-Man's most sadistic foe. We finally reached the number 1 spot, and this one might not seem all that scary at first, but once you look at the small details, you will know how terrifying this thing truly is. The Zelda series has a bunch of great villains, from the imposing demon King Ganondorf to the hammy demon Lord Girahim, the slimy usurper King Zan to the comically incompetent Master Koga, the narcissistic monster known as Yuga, and number 1 on this list, Null from The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Now, Null's scary factor comes from the atmosphere and disturbing implications in the lore, as well as disturbing things shown in the game. Let's start with the fact that it has existed before the universe itself and ate any and all life forms that began to take shape solely to keep the void for itself. And the golden goddesses created the universe itself solely to keep its greed-filled desires contained. Next, there's its personality. While it doesn't have much of one, it does show traits aligning with the deadly sins of pride, wrath, greed, and gluttony. It actively hates anything and everything that exists aside from itself. But the scariest part is the lore implications. Not only are there theories that it created the demon tribe, thus causing the rest of the series to happen, but then there's the existential horror. People who get trapped in the rips of reality it creates are trapped in a fate worse than death, where they are left unable to do anything as Null slowly chews on their essence until they eventually fade out of existence. And those who survive lose their ability to speak. And that's if they're lucky. The unlucky ones lose their sense of self, left a vegetable that is unable to feel or anything. They just exist with no motivation and without any sense of identity. Countless tri-fairies have also fallen victim to Null, as we can actually see many of their faces embedded in Null's inner walls, as we see in the Null's body dungeon in Echoes of Wisdom. This small detail shows just how many creatures fell prey to this monster. And that's just the tries seen in just a part of Null's body. Can you imagine the things that we don't see in there? The thing is also so dangerous that even Ganon fell victim to this abomination, and he was lucky to survive. But his condition went from being a mindless beast who can barely speak to a mindless beast without the ability to speak at all. Overall, Null is one of the most frightening monsters in all of Nintendo. From the pure malice it holds towards all living things, to the existential horror that its victims face, and the people of Hyrule should count themselves lucky that Link and Zelda were able to kill it. And that is why it got number 1 on this list. And there we go, the new list of my top 10 scariest villains from non-horror media. I hope this one was better than last time. If you have your own list, let me know in the comments below. And if you have some criticisms, let me know, since I'm always willing to improve for the future. With all of that said, I hope to see you all again in the next one. Happy Halloween, everyone.